Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, Space Above and Beyond, episodes 6 and 7.
With all due respect, Madam Ambassador, there will be nothing to describe if we surrender to the enemy.
You think communication is surrender?
Did they try to communicate with the Vesta and Tellus colonies? You were on the Aerotech Board of Governors. Don't the lives of the colonists mean anything? We've seen them butcher our wounded, begging for help.
The American Indians did the same thing. At the time, they were seen as aliens. But we know they were defending their land that was being taken.
And as soon as they surrendered to the settlers, the slaughter never ended.
What were they to do? They were against an enemy they knew they couldn't defeat.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that is getting chiggy with it. Na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na-na-na. Getting chiggy with it.
Boo.
Boo. Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
Well, I was doing okay.
You didn't like that?
You know what? A for effort. I'm not bringing anything, so who am I to criticize?
I'm your host, Luke. That, of course, is my co-host, Jordan. And this is a very special week. This is a very special week. Mm-hmm. We're joined by a special guest. Jane is here on the podcast. Hi, Jane.
Hey, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, before we get into the episode, since this is a TV science fiction podcast, I wanted to ask you whether, you were a big TV sci-fi fan when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably one of the ultimate TV sci-fi fans, which hopefully is why you're having me on the show, because I'm super excited to talk about all of the sci-fi that I used to watch. And I was big into Star Trek. I was big into the X-Files. I was big into the old episodes of The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits, which were all on in the 90s as well. Anything sci-fi, I basically ate it up. I bought magazines, I read stuff, I watched special features, anything involving movies, television, science fiction. Yeah, I was down.
I mean, you pretty much proved your cred when you showed up with two 1995 sci-fi, one sci-fi magazine, one TV guide, both with articles about Space Above and Beyond in them.
So I have this massive quantity of magazines that I saved, which even a couple of years ago, I went through again and could not bring myself to get rid of, which include the amazing Cinescape magazine from the mid-90s, which was a big sci-fi magazine that used to come out, plus all kinds of copies of things like Entertainment Weekly and Us Weekly anytime there was kind of a sci-fi cover, and a bunch of TV guides that have all kinds of sci-fi TV stuff, Star Trek special edition magazines. I actually was shocked at what a geek I was the other day when I was looking through, because couldn't believe I had all this stuff.
Are these displayed proudly?
They were in a box in my storage locker. They are now strewn across my living room, but I think maybe I should display them.
We'll come back to your library on future shows and see what we can dig out of it.
Mm-hmm. We should do we'll do one of those 360. We'll go around the room. You take a photo and then you can see all different angles. All the magazines everywhere.
All of my magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll put it on the Instagram and just make fun of me.
Okay. On the Instagram.
The only one that matters. Yeah. So I guess it's safe to say that you were aware of a Space Above and Beyond before you watched it?
I was aware of it, but I actually did not watch it at the time. So I was a really big X-Files fan. And so I knew who Glenn Morgan and James Wong were. I knew that they had written for the X-Files, and I knew that they had left the X-Files at the end of the second season, which was basically right when the X-Files was hitting its stride and exploding. They left the show to go and do this weird Space Above and Beyond show. And I'm not really sure why I never watched Space Above and Beyond, because it was probably mostly in my wheelhouse. I think my explanation for that was that I was watching a lot of Star Trek. There were two Star Trek series on. There was Deep Space Nine was on at the time, and Voyager. Deep Space Nine was just starting season 4, which was when Worf showed up, which was when it was getting really good. And Voyager was in its second season because it had just premiered the January before. So that was a super busy time for me. Plus the X-Files was on. Plus I was a little bit older than you guys, so I was about 16. in the fall of 1995, and I was also desperately trying to be cool, and so I was watching Friends and Seinfeld and ER and all of the stuff that my friends were watching so that I felt like I could have cultural currency at my high school. So it was a very, very busy time for me, and I think Space Above and Beyond just like slipped right through the radar for me. But I wish I'd watched it because I'm really, really loving it now.
Sounds like it was a busy time. A young Jane coming of age, trying to fit in at school.
Trying to fit in as much TV as possible.
It really was, and I had to fit it around my schoolwork. And I was telling Luke before we started recording that I had a video recording catalog system. So I had VHSs, and I had different VHS tapes for each different show. And I had preset my VCR to record all of these different shows, and I had a methodology of how I went about it. It was all very specific, and then I had to often rewatch the episodes later in the week because I wasn't available to watch them at the time that they aired. And then there were certain shows that I had to watch at least twice. So it was very complicated.
Isn't it funny, certain things that have just gone away, and I remember setting the VCR to record certain things, and if something didn't work properly, you know, the clock was off or something, it just was the worst ever. I'm like, no, it started recording 2 minutes into the show.
And it was
just
disaster.
The worst. Yeah. And it was like, it's one of those things where that's hard to relate now. And it doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess in terms of technology, that's, it was a long time ago now.
I remember having to go away for March break, and that was like frightening for me because I would set the VCR for the whole week to tape all of my shows. And if something happened, if there was like a power outage or some kind of issue at the beginning of the week, then everything would be pooched. And I remember coming back from a 2-week vacation over March break to find that neither of my X-Files episode had taped. And there was no chance of me getting to see them again until at least the summer, when they had reruns, and I had to scour the TV guides looking for the names of this episode that I had missed from earlier in the season so that I could record it and watch it properly.
Tough times in the 90s, you know?
It was tough for everybody.
Well, having now like watched a couple episodes, could you like summarize for a stranger who's never seen the show? Could you like tell them what this was in like a line?
Yeah, I would say it's a precursor to the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. If I was going to just put it into a simple, or I would say it's maybe Starship Troopers meets Battlestar Galactica as a really basic summary. It's, I guess Glenn Morgan and James Wong called it World War II in space in some of the stuff that I was reading about it. And clearly that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to do like a military perspective on science fiction.
That's probably the best synopsis we've had.
Yeah, I think so. I just say all chigs all the time.
But it's also much more serialized than I expected. That's another thing that I think it's really ahead of its time. And I'm surprised at how ahead of its time it is in terms of how serialized it is. Because I thought that it would probably be a little bit, but compared to a lot of stuff in the 90s, it's quite strong.
I've got another question, though, that's more important. Did you watch the episode where the pancakes were flying out the thing? Now Luke and I disagreed on this. Did you think that was a good special effect?
No, I did not think that was a good special effect.
All right.
That's right. That's right.
No. Caveat. Was it the best VFX this show's done?
No way.
Well, I don't know because the VFX is bad on the show. I mean, this is I think the show's real weakness, and I know you guys talked about this in your first podcast, and I haven't listened to your other podcast, so anything that has been said in between the pilot and now, I may repeat accidentally. But yeah, the visual effects are quite poor, particularly in the pilot, and I think they do get better in some of the later episodes.
They're sort of hit and miss.
Yeah, they do seem to be hit and miss. I'm wondering if it's like different vendors have different different VFX companies that are doing the different shots or having different quality of materials. I think they have moved into doing some optical effects. Like some of the ships and the flying stuff, looks to me like hybrid, like optical and
when they do anything that's practical, it turns out pretty well. Like they're doing smoke or they're doing some sort of spark or something. It looks pretty good, but when they go to the CGI, it sometimes gets a little bit dated.
I think it's definitely probably the worst thing about the show, and it's quite disappointing considering
you have seen the character West, right?
Okay, don't get me started on him. We'll talk about him later. But given the other shows that were going on at the time, like the other Star Trek, the Star Trek shows that were happening, I think somebody must have talked these guys into doing all computer generated effects and said, yeah, we can do it. It'll be all just the same. And it's not at all the same, because any of the shows that are concurrent that are doing optical effects are about 50 bazillion times better.
Anyway, those pancakes were great. Let's get on to the episode. All right, so this is the summary for episode 6, Eyes. In an effort to get West to help with an assassination plot, the young Marine is told that the high-ranking Earth officials knew about the aliens before the colonists were sent to Vesta Colony. That IMDb summary is courtesy of The Swede.
Oh, nice.
The Swede kind of pooched a little bit of the plot there, though.
Yeah, they often do.
That was something that came up about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the episode. I'm glad I didn't read that before I watched the episode.
Oh, yeah, never read these summaries before you watch the episode. Often they'll just ruin the end of it.
Completely.
I liked this one. Starts off with what I thought was the first of a series of clever emotional misdirects for this episode. The screen comes up on black and a quote comes up that says, "Tell my mother I died for my country. I did what I thought was best." And then just after it comes up, they slowly fade up the attribution to the quote. Which who did they attribute that to?
John Wilkes Booth.
John Wilkes Booth.
That's right. It comes up as something I guess patriotic, but then you find out, bad guy? He's still considered a bad guy, right? History hasn't redeemed him.
Oh, I think everyone's still on the fence, aren't they? With John Wilkes Booth.
But yeah, that kind of kicks off the episode, and we sort of see the Saratoga flying into Earth. It's their first time coming back since the pilot. The wild cards are very excited to take a leave on Earth, but it's all interrupted by what becomes a bit of a reoccurring event or element that will happen in this episode. A breaking TV news broadcast.
Yeah, I think this woman was my favorite thing in the episode.
Robin Curtis. It was Robin Curtis.
I don't know if I know who Robin Curtis is.
Robin Curtis, the newscaster, played Lieutenant Saavik on Star Trek. In Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and
Was
Star
it
Trek 4, The
really?
Voyage Home. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
She
even
played
notice.
the
Did you notice?
newscaster.
I didn't know.
No.
Well,
Good trivia.
yeah, that's great.
That's amazing. Jane, do you want to take over the podcast?
Well, I liked it because she was like, he's dead. There was everything about, she was just so, I like the idea of the newscaster watching what's happening and then being very shocked. I like that.
It's true. What's happening is a live news broadcast from New Delhi where the UN Secretary General Chartwell, who we saw in the pilot, is coming out of a meeting. At which point, a tank comes out of the crowd, one of the in vitros, and assassinates him in front of the news cameras. And a little trivia that goes around with that is they sort of talk about how this is the first assassination since 2051, when a silicate killed the president of the United States.
Is that what they said?
Yeah, they said a silicate shot President Young in 51. I think Vanson says that or something.
Yeah.
That was
like
a terrible slogan.
President Young in 51?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great
No,
slogan.
it's assassinate Young in 51.
And then the only thing I really noted around that too is they can't believe an assassination happens. I think Wong says this. He started talking about like all the things they have control of in the future, that how can they not stop an assassination? And one of the things he just drops is like, we can control the weather. I'm like, oh, that's exciting.
That's exciting, but we can't control people. But also, isn't it only 2063 right now?
Yeah.
So literally there was an assassination 12 years ago and people are shocked that it's like, can you imagine right now if we had an assassination 12 years ago, it would still be a really big deal.
It'd be George W. Bush.
Everybody would be afraid of being assassinated still. Yeah. So that was a little bit weird that they acted like 51 was a long time ago. I thought that was a little bit of a flawed premise.
Yeah, fair enough.
But anyway.
I mean, I wanted to know whether they brought back whether the guy from Justice League was the one who taught them how to control the weather.
Right.
Anyway, it was
weren't they
bad
able to,
callback.
Weren't they able to control the weather in Star Trek too, though, in Next Generation?
Yes. Well, they definitely
didn't they say they like controlled so there wasn't any more hurricanes and stuff?
Yeah, they had weather control systems on Earth and on like a lot of the colonies, and sometimes they would go haywire.
But to be fair, that's what 22,400 and something.
Yeah, it's quite a bit farther ahead of time.
Tech War also had weather control. There's a whole episode about it.
That's true.
But it's very popular.
But also, Tech War's terrible. So there's that.
Very popular science fiction premise, I guess.
Yeah.
So now that UN Secretary General's been killed, I guess what this means politically for the world of space above and beyond is that the UN Secretary General runs the world.
I know it's apparently the political system in the next 40 years is going to have a real overhaul, because I didn't quite understand how this works.
I think it was sort of leaning on the kind of the sort of this president of Earth idea, which is also present in Star Trek as well, which
Right.
is that the United Nations is not just sort of a bunch of committees. It's actually an Earth governing body. And so whoever is the head of the United Nations is the leader of the world.
And they give us a sense of how long, because they say Chartwell was the 9th person to have that much power. So it's been going on for a little while. Like, I mean, I don't know what the election cycles are like, but 9 people's a lot.
I think Trump might have been the first one.
Makes sense. He started Space Force,
Yeah.
which slowly became this show.
Yeah.
Very funny when I was searching Twitter for stuff about this. When Trump announced Space Force, so many people started tweeting about this show.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, they really saw the corollary between Trump's Space Force and Space Above and Beyond. There you go. And basically, since they need to now put a new person in charge of the UN Electoral Council has to hold an emergency off-world meeting to elect the new Secretary General, which kind of leads us into our 2 leading candidates. Who's the first leading candidate to become the new ruler of the world?
Well, the first leading candidate is a French guy with the very odd name of Chaput.
Nicolas Chaput of France. You guys want to tell me a little bit about what did you learn about Chaput in this episode?
He's anti-in vitros, isn't he?
Yes?
He is. I remember that. And he seemed fairly conservative. France was also no longer part of the EU, which I thought was interesting.
That's true. They say he's actually from an ultra right-wing party known as Parti National d'Identité. And they
Classic shampoo.
classic shampoo.
Yeah.
And the National d'Identité, the National d'Identité. I'm never gonna get that. His party has a very cool little symbol. Did it remind you of anything? That little iconography?
I was trying to figure out what that looked like.
Yeah, I didn't know either. What did you think it looked like?
It looked exactly like a Nazi swastika.
Do you think so? I don't know if it did.
It definitely did. Have another look at it.
Oh, I don't know.
To be fair, you think everything looks like a swastika.
Well, I mean, that tattoo on your chest is clearly a swastika.
Right.
You know what? I'll leave it to us to put on Instagram, and we'll let the fans decide.
Okay.
What's a swastika and what's not.
It didn't say swastika to me. It did look like something, and I couldn't put my finger on what I thought it looked like. But it did have 4 different directions of lines.
What you just said
I
sounds like
guess.
something that Hitler would have said when they were redecorating his room. He like walks in, he's like, I don't know, this doesn't say swastika to me.
What else? Just see if there's anything we missed about him here. But I think we got most of it. I guess the only other thing is he really supports an escalation of the galactic conflict. So he really wants to escalate this war. He wants to push down in vitros, and he's, I guess, just a real right-wing guy.
They sort of set him up that, at least I felt, maybe you disagree, but I felt like they had set him up so that you don't like him right off the bat. Because I think you're supposed to be supportive of Hawks and, what's his face? What's all white hair? McQueen.
Yeah.
And so I thought, here's a guy who's anti them. You should not like him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and especially because I don't know if wasn't the last episode, but was it the last episode that Hawks was looking for his family?
Yeah, there's a couple episodes ago, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a couple episodes ago, but it was still very present. And at the very beginning of this episode, when they're all looking out on Earth and talking about what they're going to do for their shore leave, they're all saying family stuff. And Hawks is standing there looking sad.
Yeah, and he's like, I'll just play solitaire, I guess.
He's very lonely.
I'll just pull lint out of my neck nipple.
Gross. One last thing about our dear friend Chaput. Was that a French accent?
Yeah, it was in the realm there.
It was weird, and then his assistant guy also had some kind of weird accent that I guess was supposed to be French.
I like in shows where they're just like, you ever heard a French accent before? It's like, yeah, I think so. I'll just do it on the day. That's it.
I looked into it. The actor is actually from Uruguay, so I think that was just his natural accent. And they're just like, close enough, you guys.
You never know. Maybe the accent adjusted over time. It's 2063. A lot has changed.
Future. He moved there. He can still become the president or whatever he is of France. It's not clear.
Maybe France has taken over Uruguay and that's still actually considered part of France now. And that's where he's from.
Maybe.
Interesting. I mean, what with that...
Yeah. Where's that war?
Was that war? Was it in Uruguay?
I know. It wasn't in Uruguay.
I don't think so either. That was in the previous episode, Jane. Sorry. And then the other leading candidate is for the job
Ambassador Hayden.
There we go.
Is that the blind lady?
Yeah, the blind lady from the U.S.
That actress, Harriet Sansom Harris, is like known for, to me, I just looked at her, I'm like, she always plays creepy characters.
Yeah.
But characters who are creepy in the way where they smile too much or they look overly calm, but actually they're insane.
Yeah, she has a character type she plays constantly, which is she's just good at being that person who you just feel uneasy. You're like, I don't think I trust her. And that's like her thing.
You know what character type she plays?
What's that?
Fraser's agent, BB Glazer.
That's right.
She did. I have to say, that was what I remembered her from first. I was like, I know her. And then I was like, oh, right, it's Fraser's agent, which she was really good in that show.
I love her on that show. In fact, when I saw her in Phantom Menace, I lost my mind. I was so happy.
Who's she in Phantom Menace?
She is a rich woman who gets married and is a drunk at her wedding. And they have to get the dress off her at some point. She's really, really good in the movie.
I don't remember.
I have no idea what you're even talking about.
Yeah. Sorry, did I say Phantom Menace?
Oh, you mean Phantom Thread, right?
I mean Phantom Thread.
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
What?
Well, because I was like,
movie have you
I know
seen?
Jar Jar Binks was in it.
No. I'm thinking of P.T. Anderson's Phantom
Thread.
Menace.
Phantom Thread.
Phantom Menace. Remember when he directed the Phantom Menace?
Yeah, that was a weird choice, but yeah.
Good one, though. It was a strong choice. A lot of fashion in that Star Wars.
Yeah.
She's kind of, I guess, positioned as a bit more of a liberal because she supports in vitro rights. She's obviously been on the side, like McQueen and her seem to have some sort of history of supporting his rights. She was a former Board of Governors director of Aerotech, the mysterious corporation that sent up all the colony missions.
Which should have been a tip-off to me that there was something else going on, but I didn't catch that at the time.
My tip-off was her face.
That because she's blind and she's got that weird implant in her face.
Yeah, I was like, something's not right here.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on it or my foot. But yeah, that's sort of her thing. I like that when they were talking to her about being blind, she mentioned she was born 6 months before they cured blindness.
Yeah, bad timing.
Yeah.
Real bad timing. And her kind of thing is she's one of the few people who is advocating to start engaging in communication with the Chigs in an attempt to negotiate their way out of the war, which Shampoo does not care for.
And how do you think that she's doing that negotiation? Because we don't even know anything about them, other than, as you keep bringing up over and over, their currency is... he's already did. The currency is poop.
What?
Jane, in future episodes you'll learn that Jordan has been developing a very complicated theory that the Chigs' currency is their own poop.
Yeah.
He's gone into it in great detail.
All right, I'll have to listen for that.
Oh, you'll never stop hearing the end of it.
If their currency is their own poop, then why do they need to fight anybody or colonize other worlds? If they just have to make their own poop and then they'll be happy. And they'll be able to
as we all know,
they need.
the wealth from poop doesn't bring happiness, you know?
I guess not.
You're told that over and over, but it just isn't true.
Money doesn't equal happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that classic Chig Beatles song.
But the other big thing about Ambassador Hayden, not only does she want to engage in dialogue with the Chigs, but she basically openly says, like, we have no hope of winning this war because there's, I forget who she's talking to, but she's having a conversation about the conquest of North America and the colonization of North America. And basically her argument is that the indigenous people didn't have a choice except to talk with the colonizers because they knew they were
That's interesting.
outnumbered
They
and done.
they get in this is actually West gets in an argument with her because he doesn't like the idea of having a conversation with the Chigs. I read it the opposite way. I thought she was saying the Chigs were the analogy for the indigenous people, that they were the ones whose land was being stomped on, and of course they had to fight back. They had to defend their way of life. I thought she was saying that in terms of in the other way.
Maybe she was. I read it the opposite.
That's interesting.
way.
Because maybe I'm wrong.
My feelings were she was creepy because she was blind.
You never trust
You're
a
just
blind person.
you're just like getting lost in her creepy blind eyes.
Her weird opaque eyeballs.
Very, very interesting reads. We went different ways on that.
Yeah. But also I was still sort of harboring under the illusion that she was going to end up being a decent person in some way. So maybe I was...
I mean, to be fair, I think what we learned in this episode is it's more complicated for everybody.
Yeah.
No one's necessarily a bad guy. But we'll move on and we'll kind of get into it. Those are sort of the two candidates up to be the Secretary General of the UN who will run the world. We learn very quickly the election is going to take place on the Saratoga. And so another thing we learn is the wildcards are finally getting replacements for all those dead members of their squad.
Who we never really meet.
Yeah, but it's only been the 5 of them for a while, and now we get to meet 3 new people who are joining the squad. There's Lieutenant Pissarak, Lieutenant Stone, and the only new member who really matters to this episode, Lieutenant Richard Swearco.
Well, was it Swearco? I wrote down Sorco. I could
was
not
I say
figure out his
Pissarak?
Yeah, Lieutenant Pissarak is the woman who joins.
They're all jerks. That's all you need to know about them. They're each one of them are like, I'm a jerk. What about you? I'm a jerk too. Right?
Well,
they're all jerks.
Swearco's only real character traits are he's a big fan of Shampoo, he hates in vitros. Those are like kind of what we get to know about him right off the top.
Wow. But he still seemed kind of stoked to be on the team.
Oh,
It was a bit of a weird thing. It's like you're trying to ingratiate yourself into this team that you say you're really excited to be on, but also you're a douche.
it is true. He was like Butts. He showed up and he's like, I have been trying to join this squad forever. And now I'm on it, and I'm going to fucking push around Hawks.
I'm going to insult everybody.
Butts was great, though. This guy was not.
He has no Butts.
He's no Butts.
So the 58th is sort of put in charge of the honor guard for all the visiting UN dignitaries. There's also a surprise dignitary that drops by that Hayden invites to the talks, which is a ship full of silicates.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It
yeah,
doesn't
and
come
one of
up
them
again.
and one of them looks just like the one from the other episode that ate the oil, right?
Yeah,
They're like kind of Cylon-like in that way. Like
Yeah.
there's multiples that look the same, but they have different
Yeah,
personalities
and what happens
different
to them?
gene pools or whatever.
You're right. They're exactly like Cylons.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah, the AIs are totally Cylons.
Well, and the show's been pretty good at picking up loose threads from previous episodes, so I assume a few episodes from now, they'll open one of the cargo ships and they'll find all of the silicates and they're dead because they forgot about them. And then they'll just be like, oh, whoops. Ooh, and then they'll just kind of close it and walk away.
And jettison them out into space next to the pancakes.
Yeah.
Now, because the assassin who killed the last Secretary General was a tank, McQueen and Hawks are pulled off duty because they don't know if they can be trusted, and they're basically sent in to be given loyalty tests. How would you describe the loyalty tests our 2 tank crewmates are given?
It's exactly like the Blade Runner test.
Yeah. It's the Blade Runner replica.
Like, it's
test.
not even, they didn't even hide it. It's just literally the exact same. It's like they just watched Blade Runner and just do that.
Yeah, it is totally the Void Conf machine.
Is that what it's called?
Void-Conf.
Void
That's what it's
Conf?
called.
Oh,
Yeah, I looked it up so I could throw that out there and look real smart.
nice.
They've got them. They're sitting on a little, with a little headset on. They got a little monitor camera flipped over their eye, and then a close up of their eye is visible on a bunch of monitors around the room, and then there's a little true false indicator. It's essentially a polygraph. It's actually less sophisticated than the Void Conf test because it's really just a polygraph test.
Right, because in Blade Runner, they're asking sort of these odd esoteric questions where you don't even really know what they're trying to find. Where this, it was like, did you disobey orders? Did you pull your pants on? It's like yes or no questions, as opposed to, something a little deeper or a little, I don't know, a little more difficult to ascertain what they're looking for.
Absolutely.
But presumably they can tell if they're lying or not by whatever their eye does.
Right, that's the major thing you need to know.
And it's also very dark in the room, much like in Blade Runner. And there's the light, all the light sources are the monitors. And I looked this up because I saw it in the credits and I was like, what is going on? The questioner, the guy who was asking the questions, who you barely ever see, is actually credited as the actor Michael Henry, who is Sam Healey from Orange is the New Black. The guy who's like their counselor guy.
I don't watch the show, do you?
I haven't watched it either.
Okay, anyway.
Sorry.
It's a really good show. You should watch it. But anyway, it was a bit part. He probably just got it as like a walk-on role practically. But he's the questioner.
Oh, interesting.
So there you go.
This loyalty test, as we said, is a bit of a polygraph. So kind of, we don't learn a lot in it, but we do get to learn a couple interesting facts about these characters. We learn McQueen's first name.
Oh, what was it? Steve?
It's like Tirius Cassius or something. Like, what is it? I didn't even write it down.
That's it. It's Tirius Cassius, or TC to his friends.
Yeah.
Oh, is it TC to his friends?
Which I feel like is a Captain Kirk ripoff. They're like, let's give him a crazy Roman sounding name and nobody will use it until they have to.
We debated another episode, who on earth gives these people these names, and we just assume they give them to themselves.
Yeah, because we realized, why would they have first and last names? Because they don't have family?
True.
And I think we had, wasn't it, what's his face? Well, Hawks was looking, and it was like Susie was his sister or whatever, right? It just said Susie. It didn't say...
Katie, I think, or
yeah,
Kate.
whatever
like
it
that.
was. But it didn't have like a whole name.
Yeah. Anyway, it was good to know what his name was. And the other thing we learn is that Hawks has killed a natural-born human at some point, and not in battle.
Yeah.
Is this new information?
This is new.
I was trying to figure out if it was new information because it was new to me, but then I thought maybe I'd missed something because McQueen seemed to know about it.
Yeah, now I could be wrong, but I think they've implied that he has McQueen sort of taken him in his confidence, and he knows this bit of information about Hawks, but I don't think they've ever mentioned it before that I can remember.
I wonder if it was a deleted scene or something from an earlier episode.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
him strangling a guy.
No, I mean him telling McQueen about it.
Right.
Like them developing this confidential friendship and revealing something. I don't know.
Wouldn't it be great if it was West and then you just never saw West again?
Happened just before
killed
this.
that
Yeah,
human.
just for this episode.
I'm sure they'll come back to it. I'm sure this is going to be like a tease to something that's coming down the lane. At any rate, what kind of comes out of these loyalty tests is McQueen won't answer a question about whether he's ever betrayed his country. Not, I think, because he has, but more out of protest for being even asked the question. So he gets tossed into the brig. And then Hawks, he complies and sort of answers the questions. And at the sort of end of his loyalty test, someone jams a needle into his neck.
They stab him in the neck quite suddenly.
Yeah.
And they implant him with something, but what happens is it gets jammed in his neck, and what we see flashes of the Parti National d'Identité, like the thing I thought might be a Nazi symbol, sort of flash on the screen. Mm-hmm. The idea being this has been implanted in his mind.
I like that because it implies that you have to finish the test or you can't inject that in someone's neck.
Well, I was trying to figure out, I was like, why wouldn't they just have done it to begin with?
Exactly. There's no reason.
I know.
That's why.
It was very funny.
Unless they were trying to determine whether or not he was loyal first and then stab him because he basically pretty much passed the test, even though it turned out that he had killed a dude in the past, but he basically passed the test. So maybe they were waiting to determine that he'd passed before they stabbed him.
Maybe it only works on loyal people.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps.
As for the rest of the wild cards, including the new guys, they're sent on a secret assignment to the moon to pick up Ambassador Hayden. What's kind of interesting here is since they're off and McQueen and Hawks have been taken off for this loyalty testing, they sort of have a conversation about whether or not it's possible to trust McQueen and Hawks as tanks with this new sort of assassination happen. And Dampus, of course, sort of stands up and says, like, Hawks has never given us any reason to be suspicious of him. But what's really weird is Hanson chimes in the background. She's just like, well, there was the one time we caught him with that She-Mail magazine.
Oh, God. That was ridiculous. I was like, okay, that's something that you could not.
This is like one of those weird lines they dropped last time. Or what was it they said about Dampus? They're like, she's a real wild ride or whatever. It's one of those like, all right, guys, come on. Gross.
Yeah, I was disappointed in Vanson. She's better than that.
Yeah.
Shaming him for his sexual proclivities.
Aside from all of the issues around this bizarre magazine that they seem to be talking about, I was just really actually annoyed that they were even having this conversation. I mean, I know that it's required for the plot of the episode, but this is just one of the times where I found a few times I'm really enjoying the series, but every once in a while I'm just like, come on, guys, like, do you have to telegraph all of this stuff so much to an audience? Like, you have to bring up these people who have clearly been loyal to each other, have been working together, who have are so cohesive as a team. All that it takes is some random act, and then suddenly they're debating it, and we're supposed to believe that they're debating it. I found it really annoying.
I will say, to be fair, for the most part, most of the 58th is not on board with this, with the sole holdout of West, who sides with the tank-hating Swervo.
Yeah. West is back into Jerk West mode. He was off for like an episode or two where I was like, all right, he's not so bad. Now I'm like, I hate him again.
He is absolutely useless.
Isn't he the worst?
He is the worst. I was calling him worst instead of West.
Oh, I can't believe we missed that.
Because like all of my notes about him was just like, worst does it again. Like, nice. He's completely useless.
He's the worst.
He's the worst.
Yeah.
He's the absolute worst.
I mean, in this episode, when him and Swervo are basically saying, maybe we can't trust these tanks, he's kind of questioning how on earth McQueen could have climbed up to the rank he got to. And he starts complaining again about how tanks got him kicked off the Tellus mission, which they didn't get him kicked off new people came on and he had to leave. And also, they saved his life.
Well,
yeah.
he's got this. I mean, I'll give him this. At least there's a consistency in his character that he has this chip on his shoulder that hasn't gone away yet. So,
that is true.
As annoying as it is, he's been at least consistent that at best he has a tenuous relationship with Hawks and he has a problem with tanks.
It's true. He's coming around. I guess they're trying to let him slowly learn his lesson, but it is very funny to watch him always be the cad.
Yeah.
Now that they have Hayden and they're sort of heading back to the Saratoga, there's a little glitch that pops up on their navigation, which reveals that someone's planted a bomb on the ship. Only one person can save them. Do you remember who that was?
Isn't it that jerky guy?
Swerveco?
Yeah.
Yeah, Swerveco's the only... How does he save them from the bomb?
He takes the bomb and he puts it into like a little escape hatch thing, and then he like ties himself to the wall, and then he hits the escape hatch and it like blows out, right?
Yeah.
But here's what I didn't understand. Why did he even have to be in the room? Why didn't he just put the bomb in the escape hatch and let it go out?
Oh, they said
he was showboating.
They said on there that someone needed to be inside to activate the controls.
But that doesn't make sense.
The escape hatch will only open if there's someone in it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was like, come on. This makes no sense how this ship operates. It was a plot point so they could go, oh, he's maybe not a bad guy. But he clearly is. He's got a real jerk face.
He saved the day.
Now he's a jerk. Him and Wes should have gone and blown up together.
They are best friends now.
Yeah, I know.
But you're not wrong in one way, though. As they get off the ship after this assassination attempt on Hayden, one of the new wildcards, Pizak, points out to everyone, it's like, hey, wasn't Swerveco at the ship before all of us? Like, he probably planted him. It was a very funny scene where it's like, I thought you two were friends.
No, he's not at all.
She's just like, oh, no. We're jerks, but we hate him too. Now that Hayden's on the ship and this assassination attempt has happened, Shampoo offers to like loan his bodyguard out to her to kind of protect her, but she doesn't need protection. But the bodyguard, after getting turned down his protection, goes up to West and invites him to a private meeting with Shampoo. He's seen something in West and he'd like to speak with him in his quarters.
Racism
privately.
is what he saw.
And in his quarters, Shampoo starts flattering West, kind of telling him how he can tell that West is a man who wants to know the truth. So he's going to tell West the truth. He
butters him up.
He really butters West up. But what is interesting is that he reveals to West that Aerotech, and by extension Hayden, did know that the Chigs existed on the colonies before they sent the missions there. They just ignored the fact that these aliens probably existed on the planets.
Well, that's what he says. But
he says we don't have anything that confirms
no,
this.
There's no corroborating evidence. And I actually wrote down, sounds like a trap for an assassination. Don't do it, West. You are the worst.
Could you imagine if you were in the room and he was like, wait a minute, sorry, this sounds like a trap. He'd be like, oh, right, I'm a big dummy. But the whole point is that you don't know what West is going to do, but he spends the most of the rest of the episode just like crouched in the shadows like a pervert.
I mean, I will give him this. I actually do think Aerotech knew, because
I think they did.
They've been angling a weird corporate conspiracy this entire series.
Yeah.
And so this was an interesting reveal that I think it should be taken at face value. It's interesting. I'll see how it develops as we go. But sort of after Shampoo drops this bomb, he takes his leave of his cabin, and the bodyguard takes West aside and says, sort of reveals that the UN vote's going to happen, but it won't get decided tonight. It'll be too close to call, and they'll probably have to recount the next day. And so when that happens, he'd like West, who's on watch duty that night, to leave the door open to the executive quarters so that Shampoo can stop by and visit Hayden in the middle of the night.
Just have a peaceful chat.
Just take a walk.
Just leave the door unlocked.
Minutes,
leave
West.
your post. Dereliction of duty.
Seems fine to me.
And we're kind of left wondering what West will do with this indecent proposal.
Right. Is he going to sleep with Robert Redford? How much better would the show be if Robert Redford was on it? That'd be great.
That'd be a good show.
Yeah.
So much better.
Well, this is kind of happening. We cut back to McQueen, and he's trapped in the brig, and he gets a couple of visitors of his own. Hayden drops by and sort of apologizes for the indignities he's going through, and sort of promising as soon as she's elected, he'll get out of the brig. She just can't do anything for him now because it's a politically inconvenient time to advocate for him. She's trying to win this election. She can't be seen sympathizing. And so he just needs to hang out and sort of to show kind of like why she's doing it and what they're up against. She passes him one of the insignia of the Party de National Identity, this little swirly singlet. That's not right. Insignia. And then as soon as she leaves, Hawks drops by for a chat too. And while they're talking, something McQueen says triggers Hawks. And he starts like ranting off sort of this like weird political rhetoric that like is out of character for him, I guess.
Yeah, or he saw the little badge.
Oh, is that what happened, you think?
I'm not sure. I didn't know at the time, but afterwards when I realized that the badge was the trigger and all of this, I was like, oh, maybe that's what happened, is that he...
No, I think the badge was the trigger, because later on when he's... and we're going to get to this moment.
To it.
But, I mean, there's a point where he's got a gun up, and what they do to stop him, at least in the moment, is cover the badge.
Yeah, no, he's definitely... But I thought maybe it triggered him in that moment with
I'm not sure.
With McQueen, but
I don't know if you saw the badge in that moment. I'm not really clear what happened there. It sort of triggered something, but basically he says some stuff that's very out of character and very political, which McQueen immediately is suspicious of, which kind of like raises his hackles, and he's worried about Hawks.
But going back to the Hayden conversation for a second, I thought it was actually kind of cool. So I wrote this down. One of her when she was giving her little spiel about why she couldn't, how everything was politically dangerous and she couldn't let McQueen out, she said, and I quote, "There are a lot of paranoid people. They believe what they feel," which I thought was very cool. And then she says, "To patronize them is a serious miscalculation. To ignore them or hope they will go away is very dangerous," which I thought was like a very prescient kind of idea, because I don't know how much that was in the cultural consciousness in the 90s. Maybe more than I realized, because I was only 16 years old.
You're right though, Jane. I was also thinking like that dialogue could have easily been transported to a show from like 2018. It would have been like right on the nose still. Totally,
right on the money. It was, I don't know, it was just very interesting, and I'm sure, I'm probably reading a little bit too much into it because of our current times, but I thought it was kind of cool.
As predicted, the election is too close to call with the UN. So the next day, they are going to try again. So there's kind of this night off. And West goes on watch. You see him contemplating whether he's going to open this door or not. But he opens the door.
Of course he does.
Doesn't take a lot. But instead of walking away and kind of letting things happen, he, as Jordan mentioned, goes and crouches in the shadows.
Yeah, you're like, West, where's your hands?
And what he sees is Shampoo sort of arrives. But he doesn't go into Hayden's quarters. He kind of walks away and goes down a hallway. And as soon as he does, Swirvko emerges with a gun, and he actually takes a shot at Shampoo. The assassination attempt is on Shampoo. And of course, West intervenes and struggles with him. And there's actually like a pretty cool little chase sequence that happens here where they're running through hallways and they're kind of taking shots at each other. Swirvko gets to his hammerhead and kind of gets in, and West manages to get a lucky shot off and shoots off a fuel line. And so as Swirvko like launches off the spaceship, I guess like what happens to his ship there? It, like depressurizes?
Yeah, I don't know.
The glass enclosure of the windshield is like broken or something.
Right.
And he's getting warnings that it's going to go off and that it's broken, but he just goes anyway, and then he just decompresses into space.
Well, it's funny. I felt like he didn't want to go, but like there was no way to stop the sequence for some reason. I don't know. It was a strange.
I think once you're in the ship, it's pretty much you don't have too many options. It's either fly back or become a space pancake.
We sort of pull back from his hammerhead floating away as he's dead to Ambassador Hayden, I guess, watching? I don't know how blind people watch out a window, but she's watching his ship float away. Mm-hmm. And a man comes to her door and steps inside and tells her, "The operative has failed. Should we activate the backup?"
And that was the twist. That was the big
turn.
twist, which actually, I'm embarrassed to say a little bit, shocked the hell out of me.
It was good.
I did not actually expect that. I was just in the middle of writing down how predictable it was, what was happening. And then I literally stopped typing as I was watching, and I went, oh, like this. And then I just typed, but wait, it's a twist. Like I just kept being surprised and writing more things.
It was a pretty well written episode, I thought. Like they didn't telegraph the turns too much. There were the red herrings were enough to throw me off. I didn't quite know which way it was ever going to go. I thought it was a pretty reasonable thriller, like through this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was quite well done, actually, especially compared to previous episodes. Because as I've said, I felt like a lot of earlier episodes were telegraphing things, and this one I thought it was, but it was a bunch of red herrings, and I thought they did it pretty well.
Jordan,
it was all right.
You're never impressed.
I don't think I like this one as much as you guys did.
Very interesting. Still going to give it like 15 points.
Yeah. Well,
We kind of jump back now to McQueen, who's, as this has been happening, he's been grilled in the loyalty test again, except this time Commodore Ross sort of intervenes. He runs the Saratoga, and he just doesn't like seeing one of his men treated this way. And he says to them, and I quote, "This is my ship. Now get the hell off her." And like throws the loyalty team out the door, and McQueen's sort of free to go. And as he's sort of running through the hallways, he runs into West and asks if the assassination attempt was by Hawks, which West informs him it wasn't, so he knows he needs to go track down Hawks. But it's kind of too late because Hawks has already been activated for his now Manchurian candidate assassination on Chaput. And as we sort of catch up with Chaput, his bodyguard finds a very convenient excuse to walk away from him for some reason. I think he says he had left some paperwork behind somewhere.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna let you. Why don't you get on the ship? He says, and then he wanders off. I'm just the worst bodyguard ever.
And on the ship, Hawks is kind of waiting in the shadows. And as Jordan sort of said earlier, McQueen arrives and he sort of deduces that the trigger that they've implanted inside of Hawks is not right-wing philosophy like is sort of implied earlier, but literally if he sees this insignia for this party, he'll shoot whatever has it. So they kind of stop Chaput from like revealing the insignia on his chest so he doesn't get shot, and he uses the pin that Hayden gave him earlier, and McQueen sort of distracts Hawks with the gun and is able to like save Chaput's life and help save Hawks' life so he doesn't assassinate this guy. And that kind of like wraps up the assassination plot.
It also wraps up the loyalty issue because
That's right.
It becomes clear that these two guys have passed the true loyalty test.
That's true. I think McQueen throws that in his face. He's like, how's that for a loyalty test?
yeah. And then he should have said, "Payback's a bitch."
But there's no payback. Loyalty's a
bitch.
And we kind of get a brief shot at the end. Chaput's bodyguard kind of takes the fall for all the assassination attempts. And as he's being dragged away, he sort of says to Wes, he's like, if you had the chance to assassinate Hitler or Stalin or Dr. Stranahan.
Yeah, there's always that's your classic science fiction where they do two that you know and they just throw in a third person. You're like, I guess that happened in the next 50 years.
Well, it's very funny because he goes Hitler and Stalin. They need no introduction. But then he says, Dr. Stranahan, the guy who started the AI war. Like,
Yeah.
In case you didn't know. And then we kind of get the final reveal that the UN has elected a Secretary General to run the world. But it's not Chaput. Hayden ends up winning in the end anyway, despite the failed assassination attempts. She is elected legitimately as the president, or not president, Secretary General. And as she's going to leave to go back to Earth, she stops to award West some sort of medal for stopping the assassination.
A medal for basically doing nothing except for what was sort of maybe his job.
Well, maybe West didn't mention the part where he left all the doors
He just
open.
wandered off for 20 minutes.
And it looked like he really did some good. He didn't accidentally set up the assassination attempt. But as she goes to pin the medal on him, West like takes his chance to ask her whether it's true that she and the AeroCorp knew that the Chigs were on Vesta and Tellus. And when he asks her that, she gets a real pissy face and takes the medal back and walks away.
She just leaves. I couldn't believe that.
I know,
she just walks
like,
away.
She could just say she could just lie.
That's what I thought. I thought she was going to be like, of course not. There was no.
No, she was like,
idea.
you threatened my sense of decorum, and just walked away.
She was very offended.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you a medal here.
Yeah. But that was where she like did her full turn. I think because she was fully elected. Actually, I was thinking at the end of the episode, she reminded me a lot of Louise Fletcher's character from Deep Space Nine, Kai Wynn, who is like this very self-serving politician who appears outwardly to be very gracious, but actually is completely calculating. And because Hayden has now won the election, she doesn't have to explain herself to anybody, and she just turns and walks away. And I think that was sort of a harbinger for like what her character maybe will turn out to be this season or was intended to be over the course of the series, as actually being like quite an antagonist.
Do you think she'll wear sunglasses in the next episode, though?
So you don't have to see her eyes?
Yeah.
This is all you could focus on the entire episode.
Yeah.
It was interesting, though. I enjoyed the episode. And, I mean, you're right. She's clearly not a good guy. That's what we learned. But, I mean, Chaput wasn't a good guy either. Like, they were just both Like, someone bad was going to get into power.
Yeah, but
either
she's a
way.
much more interesting long-term villain.
Absolutely.
Like, from a dramatic perspective, because has the outward appearances of being fairly liberal and left-wing, but then, of course, she's also been on this evil board of directors of the corporation that I'm sure is going to turn out to have been much more evil than we were aware of.
Well, I assume in future episodes we'll get some scenes where Wes chants, "Lock her up, lock her up."
Too soon.
All right, you guys want to move on to episode 7?
I just have one more thing about this episode that I wanted to ask your guys' opinion on.
Absolutely.
So, when Hawks is brainwashed, he's done so by, like, with a needle to the neck. Do we presume that this brainwashing could happen to anybody or only to tanks?
I think the actual test was what was brainwashing, and the needle was maybe the final sort of like make them more susceptible to the final test. So I think it was only tanks.
So, was the tank who killed the president at the beginning of the episode also an assassin? And if so, who hired him and why?
I think he was an assassin who went through the same loyalty test, but I don't know who hired him.
You don't think Hayden? You don't think it was Hayden?
Probably West.
As a power play? Probably West. It can't be West.
Well, all right. If we're going to go down that direction, was Swirvko a tank?
Well, I don't know. Did we ever see the back of his neck?
Oh, that's actually a thing. Yeah, you're right. Because no, I'm pretty sure he wasn't because he was so anti-tanks.
But he wasn't. It was just because he was working for Hayden. He wasn't anti-tanks. That was just his cover.
But was he brainwashed? He was just a John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he was a John Wilkes Booth. I think he was a guy that was with Hayden that agreed to do the job, and in order to cover for himself, he pretended to be pro-Chaput.
All right, everybody at home, make a giant flowchart on your wall. Run strings between it. Take a photo. Send the conspiracy to us.
And Luke wants you to put as many swastikas on that as possible.
All right, let's get into the next one, you guys.
All right.
Episode 7, The Enemy.
All right. We all got burned by those lights.
And that's when Damfu started freaking out.
And Wang, you weren't exactly displaying the nerves of a brain surgeon.
Shut up! We're all a little scared here.
All right! And we all had headaches in this area. That's where the amygdala area is. Come on, why do I know I ain't gonna be following this real good? It's a collection of neurons that houses fear memories. Injections in that area decreased post-traumatic stress in AI war veterans. Now, I swear, I heard an electronic pop before the flashes, like a bomb. What if the chicks have developed a weapon that could affect the area of the brain that houses fear memories? It would increase our phobias to the point of complete incapacitation.
Electronic nerve gas that causes us to turn on each other.
The members of the 58th turn on each other after they land on the planet Tartarus and encounter a Chig mind-altering weapon that wreaks havoc on the area of the brain that controls fear. That IMDb synopsis is also courtesy of the Swede.
Also gave away a little stuff again.
It's true.
Classic Swede.
That Swede. He's so tricky. So I'm going to do this off the top, and you guys can chime in later if you want to. But throughout this episode, they're going to keep cutting sort of back to the wild cards, being interviewed, interrogated by McQueen and Commodore Ross about whether Dampus derelicted duty or whatever. Everyone on the team basically says the same thing every time they cut back to this, which is basically like, you weren't there, man. You don't get it. So I'm not going to go back every time they go back to these like interrogation sequences because I don't think they really add a lot to the plot. But I don't know if you guys have anything you wanted to throw in about these interrogations.
All I want to say is this episode, and I don't know if I'll be able to articulate this properly, it had something that kind of annoys me, which is if the characters just said what happened and were clear about it, I don't see what the issue is and why there would even be this whole integrity commission or whatever you want to call it, them checking to see what happened. And blah, blah, blah. They go through the whole thing and they all have their story and like, yeah, you had to be there. You don't understand. But at the very end, they just go, oh, though they told us what happened and we just decided it was fine. I just at the end, I was like, what was the point of this episode? Does that make sense?
There weren't really any stakes in the interrogations. The interrogations were entirely just as a narrative device.
Yeah, they were pointless.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying is the story itself is fine. There's a narrative in the story, but these like flash forwards to them being interrogated lended nothing to the episode.
They also weren't even facing them when they were interrogated. The blocking of the interrogation was very strange. They were like at a long table, and the person being interrogated was at the end of the table, facing directly to camera, and then at the camera end of the table, facing on the sides, facing each other, were the two commanders who were interrogating this person.
Right.
It didn't even make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't very useful scenes. I guess they just padded up the episode.
Yeah. Well, it was supposed to add this mystery of what's going to happen. It's like, but you're going to watch it happen anyway. So it just was a weird narrative technique.
Yeah, I have quite a few criticisms of this episode. The main one of which is that they use so many narrative techniques that have been previously used in so many different shows that it's almost not worth watching.
Right.
Also, Dampoose is real annoying in this episode. Didn't you find that? Like,
everyone was.
Everyone's annoying, but I thought she was, and I've never had a problem with her character before. In this episode, every time she appeared, I'm like, oh gosh, she's gonna start screaming out blood
She
again.
just had too many lines. Like if they had just cut out some of the times where she kept saying, "But there's blood, but I can't go." Like if they just made it so she looked scared. Like instead of every cutaway to her talking about blood and saying all of these lines, I think it would have helped a lot.
All right, let me get us started into this episode here. The mission this episode is the wildcards are being sent to deliver supplies to a battlefield on Tartarus. What do you guys know about Tartarus?
It's the place beyond hell.
Well, I know it's also correctly pronounced Tartarus.
Oh, thank you. Tartarus?
No, but they
Tartarus.
called it Tartarus on the show, but it's Tartarus.
I don't know.
Is it? I wrote down Tartarus. I don't know what is that.
Tartarus is Greek hell, like the hell below Hades, where the Titans are.
Oh, hence the
doomed
nickname
to live is Tartarus.
Oh.
So the idea that, and I wasn't sure if the planet was actually called, or if because Wang was just like they call it Tartarus.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be its nickname.
Well, yeah, the nickname of the battlefield or the planet because the battle was ongoing.
Oh,
But
interesting.
I didn't know why he pronounced it. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But
I mean, it's
that
just
is the source of
that's how.
Tartarus.
What do we know about the planet then, from what they tell us, or the battlefield?
Isn't it just that there's everyone's fighting and I don't know, no one's winning?
There's an ongoing
I don't
battle,
know.
and the generals are weirdly obsessed with continuing it, even though it's a no-win situation. I thought it was going to be like a Gallipoli. Like, I thought they were going to be tunneling and stuff, which would have been cool, but it seemed to be more like a trench warfare kind of situation when we got down there. And I guess there's no sun. The sun had burnt out at some point. Did they say that?
What they said, Wong, when he's talking about the planet, says he calls it the planet that didn't have what it took to be a star. And I didn't understand what he meant by that.
Also, this is a classic Wong, as that's the character name, right?
Yep.
They clearly the writers don't know what to do with him because the only time he has dialogue is to mention some sort of sporting event that hasn't really happened, or he's just there to give you plot information points like this.
Although
Like,
I did like it when he talked about his girlfriend that he met on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
That was fun.
Vanson didn't like it.
Vanson's mind was just blown by the idea of meeting someone on the internet. She could not handle it.
Yeah, classic Vanson.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at here is the planet. What they kind of said about this planet is you get about 30 meters of visibility. It's got a sulfur dioxide atmosphere. It's 68.5 degrees Celsius at night. It's just like an awful planet they've been basically stuck on since the beginning of the war, and they just can't get any forward momentum taking it. So as they land their transport onto the planet, Wong goes to look at the cargo, and he's grossed out by some cockroaches that are crawling all over it.
And this is the first time we've ever seen cockroaches on the ship. I don't know why they were there before. Was this been a problem on the ship, cockroaches?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
And then like a container falls over and a bag of blood like falls onto Dampoose's hand, and she like picks up and puts it back. And really, this is just like the most awkward foreshadowing for this episode. Like,
Also, why were they transporting a big bag of blood?
so many casualties.
It was just
I guess they were delivering supplies, right?
It
So
was-
probably for transfusions.
I think this episode, and we can go through, obviously we'll go through bits of it, but it had so many clumsy things in it. Like, she's scared of blood. Why? I don't know. And it's like, because there's a bag of blood there. He's scared of cockroaches. Why? It's cockroaches. And it's like they just thought of the first thing that came to their mind of what their fears could be, as opposed to something interesting or deep that maybe told us something about the character. And none of them really did. None of them really did.
Oh, wrong again.
No, I'm not wrong. What did you learn?
Wong talks about how he grew up in a hellhole
Yeah,
where
but
his pillow was covered in bugs.
I know, but we don't learn anything about him though. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
Get angrier, Jordan.
No, who cares though?
No, I agree. This is why I
cares?
thought that it was like kind of lazy writing. Is that it was they had all these like surface fears that end up causing a lot of plot problems, but they don't in the end actually reveal anything really about the characters. Like Hawks doesn't want to wear his helmet.
Yeah,
Like, why?
well, that's what I mean. So it's like, no, I get you. On the surface,
Jordan, I don't care.
On
I'm
the
just
surface,
riling you up.
on the surface, it looks like you're learning about these characters, but you're not.
Well, in a better version of this episode, you would be.
Yeah,
And
but
that
it might
was-
as well have been like, I like the color blue. Great, now I know that character likes blue. Who cares?
Yeah.
I've
I
never
didn't
seen
like
you
this
so
episode.
passionate.
I didn't like this episode.
Yeah, they land. There's a squad that tries to get onto the ship that's freaking out, and they're gunned down by another Marine. So they're like, "Oh, this planet's crazy." And this was really weird as a throwaway line, but in the chaos, they're like, "The flight crew got killed and they damaged the engine." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
When did that happen?
I love throwaway lines like that stitch stuff together.
They get a brief message that's called down from McQueen telling them they're going to be stuck down there because of high wind and they won't have radio contact, so we know they're isolated on this scary
Of course,
planet.
the radio's not going to work.
Did you guys catch McQueen's call sign? The first time we've
No, what
heard
was it?
his wild card call sign. He's Queen 6,
Oh, really?
which isn't a card.
Queen 6? That's
Like,
his call sign?
A six of spades would be a card.
Yeah. Also, his name is just Queen.
Yeah,
So it's-
McQueen, Queen 6. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, I didn't catch that. I was just busy thinking about the Marine that was crazy and shooting them and yelling, "I'm afraid of myself. I'm afraid of
And
myself."
I'll try not to keep mentioning and harping on this, but I hate it in TV shows where characters just yell all their lines to give a sense of conflict or urgency. And this episode was just packed with people nonstop yelling about nothing. I most of my notes are "shut up, please stop, shut up." That's what my notes are for this episode.
Yeah, the 58th basically decides they're going to try to track this crazy Marine down and subdue him and bring him back. So they wander through a spooky canyon. It's full of spooky echoes. They finally find the crazy guy, and as you said, Jane, he's shouting about being afraid. But before they can get to him, he steps on a mine.
I like that part.
What's that mine called?
Oh, I wrote it down.
I
Do
didn't.
you have it, Jane?
No.
I have it. Hold on. It's called Buzzbeam.
Yeah, a buzz beam mine, which is very fun because it just shoots a very bright light out of it and I guess cuts him in half.
Yeah, it's like a lightsaber bomb.
Yeah, it's a chig mine. Very fun little mine they built.
Yeah, I like that.
And as soon as that happens, the entire area they're in starts like flashing like lightning. And kind of like, can you describe what's happening when that flashing's happening?
I know that it flashes and then they sort of superimpose over skeletons. And I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be skeletons were kind of attacking them. They were in the lasers, or that was like X-rays of their own bodies.
It was supposed to be X-rays, I think, but it was this very kind of crude, superimposed sort of Jason and the Argonauts like skeletons.
It did
over
look
top.
just like that. Yeah, yeah.
But I guess you could tell that. I think the point was that whatever the light was, it was permeating them in a way that was unsafe.
Yes, and that's kind of what happens is they sort of talk about how they've got burns on their hands now and they got bad headaches in the back of their heads after this flashing goes off.
Sort of like the Cuban embassy weapon,
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's right.
Headaches, vision problems, paranoia.
Oh, the Cubans have built the fear bomb the Chigs have.
Are the Chigs really just a representation of the Cubans? Is that what the show's trying to tell me?
It's a very racist show.
Well, if you take it to the next level, I mean, the Chigs are basically the bugs from Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
And the bugs were essentially communist. In Starship Troopers,
That's true.
the bugs were communists and the Earth was fascist. So, you know,
That's true.
they could
Science
be Cubans.
fiction.
Yeah.
It's got everything.
Full of allegories.
Yeah.
The entire 58th retreats back to the transport ship after this kind of happens. This is kind of where we get into what Jane was talking about earlier is Damphos is now flipping out because her hand is bleeding and she's like terrified of blood and she just won't stop talking about blood. Blood. She's like a vampire.
Yeah, she is. That'd be more
Blood.
interesting if she became a vampire. Way better episode.
Wong he sees roaches and he starts freaking out and he tears out all the wires from their comms thing to like get out one of the roaches to kill it. So
Okay, I have to stop you guys. His name is Wang.
Is it Wang?
His name is Wang, and I think we need to go back and re-edit the podcast. So you need to each record some Wangs that you can then.
You said I'll be honest.
over.
I didn't know what his name was. I blame you because
His name is
Wong.
Lieutenant
It's
Paul
been
Wang.
7 episodes.
And you guys have been calling him Wong the whole time.
Oh, you know what?
No
Can we
way.
just say one thing? I have a running list of corrections of things we've said wrong, so we can just add that to our list.
All right. Well, we'll try to remember to call him Wang going forward.
Yeah.
So many angry fans out there.
Yeah.
Wow, Wang's really. We really haven't paid much attention to him.
Poor guy. All he wants to do is watch football.
It's true. He just wants that football. Anyway, Wang sees a roach and he pulls out all the cords from their communication system, which is just kind of disables their ability to their homing device, which they're going to get rescued with because their ship's disabled, is now also disabled. But they basically now have a new task: is they have to find an uplink prong. Like it's so silly. Like they're just given like another thing to do. It's like you need an uplink prong to fix the homing beacon you just broke. So now we have to go back outside the ship to go find a dead Marine to find this uplink prong to fix the homing device.
And it's all talk, and none of it is visual. There's no visual representation of like it's just like there's a big machine that has sparks flying out of it, and everything's dark because everything's always dark on the show. And it was just chatty about we need this and we need that.
Blood.
So they're gonna go back out.
God, mother.
Damp House can't go because she's torn up her suit with a knife trying to get it off of her because of the blood or something. So they rest and go out. Hawks doesn't want to put on his helmet because he's afraid of tight spaces now. That's his big fear. Everyone's getting their one big fear.
Yeah. But it was also they never stopped talking about their fears, but they also weren't really clear because I was like, that what is his fear? Because he at one point wanted to really turn up the light. What did that have to do with anything?
Well, when they're outside, Hawks flips out because he's afraid their chigs are going to see them with the light, I think, which wasn't his fear. It was just weird. But as soon as he breaks the lights, Vanson freaks out because she's afraid of the dark.
Yeah, was that her fear? It took me a while to figure
that's
out
what
what
I mean.
her fear was.
It wasn't weirdly for an episode where that's the point of the episode, and they never stop talking about it. It's actually hard to tell what their actual fears are.
Well, it's funny because she gets afraid of the dark, and at some point she sort of says, "I'm afraid of it because it was dark when my parents were killed." Like it's a really tenuous connection.
Yeah.
And maybe Hawks is afraid of his helmet because it reminds him subconsciously of being in the tank.
That's more thought that went into the show.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They do end up finding an uplink prong. Also, not even on screen. Like they're just like, we found one. And it's at that point that Wes starts hearing a girl crying, which is a stand-in for his girlfriend, which he's afraid he's lost. So that's his fear. Is not a fear. He's just like hears his girlfriend crying.
He is the worst.
And he runs off, leaving them. So now they have the uplink prong, but now they have to go get wet. So there's just like another obstacle.
And how many times, by the way, we should have kept a tally. How many times do they have to go find Wes in this show? This is at least the third or fourth time.
This is definitely the third time for sure.
Yeah.
He runs off. He either finds or hallucinates a sergeant kind of complaint, like telling them more scary things about the place.
And this actually was something I wrote, and maybe you both have a different opinion, or can it clarify? I wasn't sure for most of the episode if they were hallucinating things or if those things were actually there that were triggering these responses, because at times it seemed to be one and at times it seemed to be the other. Like I thought actually the cockroaches weren't really there. That's what they were going to show. Or the blood really wasn't on her hand. But then it was like, oh no, it is there. But then they're also hallucinating noises and seeing things. So it was like, I was like, just pick one or the other.
I thought they were hallucinating too. I thought the cockroaches were a hallucination, and I thought,
But they weren't.
But they weren't, and I thought the blood was.
Because I kept saying,
felt
like
like it was
why
very
didn't they just clean up
inconsistent.
the blood? So they knocked this blood over at one point, and then they just left it. Like, just clean up the blood. It solves all the problem with her.
Well, but then
Just
at
what
one
she
point,
said. She
Wang
said it wouldn't
says,
solve it.
"Yeah, Wang
wouldn't
says,
solve it?
Why don't we clean it up?" Although it's very, very late in the whole story for someone to be suggesting. I mean, it's a safety hazard to have the blood on the ground. Like they should just be cleaning it up anyway.
It is a safety
I mean, they're
hazard.
Marines. They're not just going to leave liquid on the ground when they're running around in the dark, and someone could slip and hurt themselves.
It's true.
It's a valid fear.
It's a biohazard. Yeah. So yeah, this sergeant, I don't know. I couldn't tell if he was real or not. He might have been real. He might have been a hallucination. It was no one else sees him, so it's impossible to say. The rest of the 58th catches up with West. They find a bunker full of dead Marines who have all killed each other. From that, they start kind of deducing that the flashes they've been seeing are some sort of new Chig weapon, like a fear bomb or some sort of electronic nerve gas, they posit, that like affects the amygdala of the brain, which is at the back of the head, which is where they're getting the headaches, which I guess is also where fears are held.
Yeah, sure. Sure, why not?
Why not?
That's not one of the biggest problems of the episode, so.
I will say, there's one note I made here is they're talking about this electronic nerve gas that causes fear. And I believe Vanson says, imagine if they used it on New York or L.A. And Wang takes that moment to practice his hacky stand-up comedy routine when he says, you might not be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
I was just like, whoa. Well,
Yeah.
that's some bad comedy you got there, Wang.
Well, his timing may not be there.
Anyway, from this bunker, they once again retreat back to the ship because now they have the uplink prong and west. Vanson steps on a buzz beam mine, so they have to use mirrors to like reflect the mine so she can get off of it.
Yeah, easy solution for this weapon.
I mean, there's an easy way to defuse it. It would have been better if that idea was used in a different episode where it was a little more interesting, but it was just like everyone was just screaming at each other at that point.
And didn't you think at some point, aren't you glad that Thomas Hobbes wasn't there trying to defuse it?
I was thinking about Thomas Hobbes, our good friend, and his mind problems.
That's harsh.
The Harsh Realm guy?
Yeah, that's Harsh Realm. Anyway, they make it back to the airlock. They get back inside, sort of. They have to like hotwire it because Damp House won't come into the room because there's blood everywhere, blah, blah, blah. They end up just screaming at each other for a while with guns pointed at each other. They're just like, it doesn't even make sense. They're afraid of very specific things, but now they're also just angry at each other too.
Yeah, it's they're trying to ratchet up the tension, but they haven't earned it at all, so it just ends up people yelling at each other.
No, but they kept yelling, and this is like a part where I thought like, because Glenn Morgan and James Wong weren't the main writers on this episode, it was another writer, but this is where I thought that maybe they had come in and tried to like make some changes to the episode because they kept yelling, "This is not us. This is not us," when they were firing at each other, so a little bit of a backstory is, which you guys are probably aware of, is there's a very famous X-Files episode from the first season called Ice, which was written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, which is basically just the thing. Mulder and Scully go to an Arctic research station.
Good episode.
It's a great episode, and they find there's something in the ice that is infecting people and making them behave strangely and turn on each other. And like there's a dog in it that goes at the beginning. It's just like the thing. But one of the key lines from that episode, which is much better done than this episode, is that they keep saying, "We are not who we are," or "We may not be who we are," or "You may not be who you are," and that the idea that your mind has been changed and that you've been taken over by this strange animal. And so every time they kept yelling, "This is not us, this is not us," I'm like, oh, this is "We are not who we are." Like this is Glenn Morgan and James Wong trying to like fix this episode and turn it
that
into
is a good example though,
ice.
because for the most part, that is the exact same, at least plot structure of this episode, except in the X-Files it was done really well, and in this one it was done really poorly.
I'm realizing also, now that we've said it a few times, I think I thought Wang was called Wong because I thought James Wong had named it after himself. I actually do think that's what I thought when I started the show. Oh well, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Did you say you were Wong?
I certainly did not. I wanted it for the record. I did not say that. Anyway, they yell at each other, but they like are basically able to barely work together to fix the homing beacon. As soon as it's fixed, McQueen has landed already.
Amazing.
And they're like, "Oh, we can't get to you. You just have to walk through a minefield to get to us." They have a scene where they kind of sing an old Marine song.
Yeah.
I guess to keep their heads on as they walk through the minefield.
Which is not a song that we've heard them sing before.
No.
Although it was a song that the guy was singing at the very
it's what the
beginning.
crazy guy
was
sang
singing
at the start. It's the bookend.
Yeah, but it didn't have any emotional resonance
No.
because we hadn't heard them singing it before.
No, it has no. And they just get rescued. And then we kind of cut back to, as we mentioned, there was the interviews with them where they might get in trouble, but it's basically waved off and they're all off the hook because McQueen and Commodore Ross accept there's some new Chig weapon. And Hawk basically sums up the entire episode with this last line where he might as well be looking at the camera when he says, "The enemy was down there, but it wasn't the Chigs. It was fear." Jordan, get it?
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah.
I don't know if you get it.
Yeah. Well, this episode didn't hit us over the head enough times with it.
Yeah, it was real deep way of them like closing out this episode. It was, yeah. It was not their finest moment this episode.
You know, I think it probably seemed like a good idea. Everyone needs a bottle episode from time to time, and I think that's probably kind of what they had hoped this would be. And generally, bottle episodes can be done quite well and can be really, really fun because the producers like them because they're cheap, and the writers like them because they get to, you know, play with the character dynamics, and actors like them because they get to do interesting things with their character, and it's not all about exposition and plot, and a lot of the stuff that they have to say is important. So I feel like this concept was probably thrown around in the writer's room as being like, yeah, this is a great idea. We'll get them together in one place. We'll do a thing episode, or we'll do a paranoia episode, and we'll cement all these character moments. And then just nobody checked to make sure it was good.
Yeah.
Like they just wrote it and filmed it without actually sort of auditing it and being like, is this episode actually accomplishing the things that we need it to accomplish?
I think that's anything better than I could say.
Because it doesn't have really any like over the course as a season-wide story arc, it doesn't have any clear consequences. So the head writers are maybe not sitting there checking it to make sure that it checks all the boxes, because it doesn't really have any boxes to check plot-wise.
So do we think we're gonna find out if that guy was Mirage or not? Hallucination?
I assume that'll come back.
The next time West has to leave and go look for his girlfriend?
I was actually disappointed when the 58th goes down. They didn't bring their new members, Lieutenant Pizak and Lieutenant Stone.
Yeah, they're
Not
still there.
still members, are they?
I assume they'll be back.
No.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Let's get into some ratings, Jane. Do you want to give some final thoughts and give us a rating for the first episode, Eyes?
For Eyes, yeah, I really liked Eyes. I mean, I think I liked it more than Jordan did. I definitely thought it was interesting. I thought it was sort of a political thriller type of episode, which I really enjoyed. And it took a lot of unexpected twists and turns. And the performances I thought were quite good for the show. So I gave it an 8.5.
Holy moly.
Yeah. I thought it was one of the better episodes so far of the series.
I'll go next. I agree. I actually was going to give it a 9 when I finished watching it. Looking back, not everything held up quite as well, but it's still an 8.5 for me.
You're both insane. Insane.
What is it?
6.5.
Oh, come on.
No, I thought the episode was kind of a mess.
This
I
episode,
thought they were trying to do a lot of stuff and didn't quite hit it on most of them. That's what I thought.
There's no Carlita's room.
No, it's not. That wasn't the episode. It had a beautiful ending. Hey, 6.5. Meh.
All right. Well, let's move on to Enemy. Jane, you want to give us Enemy?
Enemy, well, I think we've been over a lot of the issues that I had with this episode. I gave it a 6, which I think is a little generous, but I still wanted to be cognizant of the time and the tropes of the genre and all of that kind of stuff. So I thought it was a average to slightly below average version of a lot of common sci-fi stories.
Jordan?
5. They would stop yelling. I tuned out because I just hate characters yelling about nothing. I was bored. 5.
I'm giving it a 3.
Whoa!
Oh, I love when Loke goes real low.
It
That's
wasn't good.
brutal.
It wasn't a good episode.
No, it wasn't,
It was
right?
a very bad episode.
Yeah, I think I had to check this. I think it was my least favorite episode.
In a show that I know can do better.
Yeah.
I've seen them do better. I watched the last episode and watched them do better.
Yeah.
It was just it was hard for me to forgive. All right. I guess that about wraps it up. Before we go, Jane, I understand you're a motion picture editor. I know that because we're friends.
I am a motion picture editor. Thank you, Luke.
Is there anything you'd like to plug? Anything you've worked on lately you think our audience might enjoy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I work on a lot of indie stuff that's often hard to find, but I did a movie a couple years ago that's a sci-fi movie. So if people are enjoying our sci-fi podcast, they might enjoy this sci-fi movie called Rememory. It went to Sundance in 2017. It stars Peter Dinklage and Julia Ormond, and it's a little bit of a sci-fi drama with some mystery in it, and it's available now on streaming. It's on Amazon Prime in the US. It's on Vudu and Hulu and like whatever, all of the different services, Google Play.
Yeah, check it out, people. Check it out.
That was
Jordan?
a very, very shameless plug.
That was good. We need a shameless plugs.
I felt like I expected you to kind of ease into that in like a little more of a naturalistic kind of way. It was just like, no, just
It was
say
good.
your thing. Go
It was
say your
good.
This
thing.
has really helped my memories, these episodes. Sort of like some sort of rememory. Don't
Thanks,
you think,
Jordan.
Jane?
It's awesome. Great.
Jordan, is there anything you want to plug?
Nope, nothing.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody, especially you, Jane.
Thanks for having me. I had a really good time. I'm really enjoying watching the show, so I love being on your podcast.
Well, I hope you'll keep following along as we go through the rest of Space Mob Beyond.
Absolutely.
And if anyone at home wants to weigh in on how we didn't know one of the main characters' names, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram or Twitter at continuumdrag. Until next time, Jordan, I'll keep watching, I don't know, whatever we're watching, I guess. Yeah, man, I'm so bad at these.
The next 300 episodes of the show.
All right. One day I'll get one of these sign-offs right. See you later, Jordan.
See you later.
Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Ruxedler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, Emily Carter, and Dwayne Wright.